Book 19. The Avenger fasts and arms. Dawn in her yellow robe rose in the east out of the flowing ocean, bearing light for deathless gods and mortal men, and Thetis brought to the beach her gifts from the god of fire. She found her dear son lying beside Patroclus, wailing while his men stood by in tears around him. Now amid that throng, the lovely goddess bent to touch his shoulder, and said to him, "Ah, child, let him lie dead. For all our grief and pain we must allow it. He fell by the god's will. But you, now, take the war gear from Hephaestus. No man ever bore upon his shoulders gear so magnificent." And she laid the armor down before Achilles, clanging loud in all its various glory. Myrmidons began to tremble at the sound, and dared not look straight at the armor. Their knees shook. But anger entered Achilles as he gazed, his eyes grown wide and bright as blazing fire, with fierce joy as he handled the god's gifts. After appraising them in his delight, he spoke out to his mother swiftly. "Mother, these the god gave are miraculous arms, handiwork of immortals plainly, far beyond the craft of men. By heaven, I'll wear them. Only I feel the dread that while I fight, black carrion flies may settle on Patroclus' wounds, where the spearheads marked him, and I fear they may breed maggots to defile the corpse, now life is torn from it. His flesh may rot." But silvery-footed Thetis answered, "Child, you must not let that prey on you. I'll find a way to shield him from the black fly hordes that eat the bodies of men killed in battle. Though he should lie unburied a long year, his flesh will be intact and firm. Now, though, for your part, call the Achaeans to assembly. Tell them your anger against Agamemnon is over and done with. After that, at once, put on your gear, prepare your heart for war." Her promise gave her son wholehearted valor. Then, turning to Patroclus, she instilled red nectar and ambrosia in his nostrils to keep his body whole. And Prince Achilles passed along the surf line with a shout that split the air and roused men of Achaea, even those who up to now had stayed amid the massed ships, navigators, helmsmen, men in charge of rations and ship stores. Aye, even these now headed for assembly, since he who for so long had shunned the battle, Achilles, now appeared upon the field. Resolute Diomedes and Odysseus, familiars of the war god, limped along, leaning on spears, for both had painful wounds. They made their way to the forefront and sat down, and last behind them entered the Lord Marshal Agamemnon, favoring his wound. He too had taken a slash from Antenor's son Coon. When everyone had crowded in, Achilles, the great battlefield runner, rose and said, "Agamemnon, was it better for us in any way when we were sore at heart to waste ourselves in strife over a girl? If only Artemis had shot her down among the ships on the day I made her mine after I took Lyrnessus. Fewer Achaeans would have died hard at enemy hands while I abstained in anger. Hector's gain, the Trojans' gain. Achaeans years hence will remember our high words, mine and yours, but now we can forget them, and as we must, forego our passion. Aye, by heaven, I drop my anger now. No need to smoulder in my heart forever. Come, send your long-haired Achaeans into combat, and let me see how Trojans will hold out, if camping near the beachhead's their desire. I rather think some will be glad to rest, provided they get home, away from danger, out of my spear's range." These were his words, and all the Achaeans gave a roar of joy to hear the prince abjure his rage. Lord Marshal Agamemnon then addressed them, standing up, not in the midst of them, but where he had been sitting. "Friends, fighters, Danaans, companions of Ares, it is fair to listen to a man when he has risen and not to interrupt him. That's vexation to any speaker, able though he may be. In a great hubbub, how can any man attend or speak? A fine voice will be muffled. While I open my mind to the son of Peleus, Argives, attention, each man weigh my words. The Achaeans often brought this up against me and chided me, but I am not to blame. Zeus and fate and a nightmare fury are for putting savage folly in my mind in the assembly that day when I wrested Achilles' prize of war from him. In truth, what could I do? Divine will shapes these things. Ruinous folly, eldest daughter of Zeus, beguiles us all. Her feet are soft from walking not on earth but over the heads of men to do them hurt. She traps one man or another. Once indeed she deluded Zeus, most noble of gods and men, they say. But feminine Hera, with her underhanded ways, tricked him the day Alcmene in high Thebes was to have given birth to Heracles. Then glorying Zeus remarked to all the gods, "Hear me, all gods and goddesses, I'll tell you of something my heart dwells upon. This day the childbirth goddess, Iliad, brings into the light a man who will command all those around him, being of the race of men who come of my own blood." But in her guile the lady Hera said, "You may be wrong, unable to seal your word with truth hereafter. Come, Olympian, swear me a great oath. He will indeed be lord of all his neighbors, the child of your own stock in the race of men, who drops between a woman's legs today." Zeus failed to see her crookedness. He swore a mighty oath and mightily went astray, for flashing downward from Olympus' crest, Hera visited Argos of Achaea, aware that the strong wife of Perseus' son, Sthenelus, was big with child, just entering her 7th month. But Hera brought this child into the world's daylight beforehand by 2 months, and checked Alcmene's labor to delay the birth of hers. To Zeus, the son of Cronos, then she said, "Zeus of the bright bolt, father, let me add a new event to your deliberations. Even now a superior man is born to be a lord of Argives, Eurystheus, a son of Sthenelus, the son of Perseus, of your own stock. And it is not unfitting for him to rule the Argives." This report sharply wounded the deep heart of Zeus. He picked up Folly by her shining braids in sudden anger, swearing a great oath that never to start heaven or Olympus, Folly, who tricks us all, should come again. With this, he whirled her with one hand and flung her out of the sky. So to men's earth she came, but ever thereafter made Zeus groan to see his dear son toil at labors for Eurystheus. So too with me. When in his shimmering helm great Hector slaughtered Argives near the ships, could I ignore my folly, my delusion? Zeus had stolen my wits, my act was blind. But now I wish to make amends, to give all possible satisfaction. Rouse for war, send in your troops, I here repeat my offer of all that Odysseus promised yesterday. Stay if you will, though the war god presses you. Men in my service will unload the gifts from my own ship, that you may see how richly I reward you. Achilles answered, "Excellency, Lord Marshal Agamemnon, make the gifts if you are keen to. Gifts are due, or keep them. It is for you to say. Let us recover joy of battle soon, that's all. No need to dither here and lose our time, our great work still undone. When each man sees Achilles in a charge, crumpling the ranks of Trojans with his bronze-shod spear, let each remember that is the way to fight his man." Replied Odysseus, the shrewd field commander, "Brave as you are, and like a god in looks, Achilles, do not send Achaean soldiers into the fight unfed. Today's melee will not be brief when rank meets rank, and heaven breathes fighting spirit into both contenders. No, tell all troops who are near the ships to take roast meat and wine for heart and staying power. No soldier can fight hand to hand in hunger all day long until the sun goes down, though in his heart he yearns for war. His legs go slack before he knows it. Thirst and famine search him out, and his knees fail as he moves. But that man, stayed with victualling and wine, can fight his enemies all day. His heart is bold and happy in his chest. His legs hold out until both sides break off the battle. Come then, dismiss the ranks to make their breakfast. Let the Lord Marshal Agamemnon bring his gifts to the assembly ground, where all may see them. May your heart be warmed. Then let him swear to you before the Argives, never to have made love to her, my lord, as men and women by their nature do. So may your heart be peaceable toward him. And let him sate your hunger with rich fare in his own shelter, that you may lack nothing due you in justice. Afterward, Agamemnon, you'll be more just to others, too. There is no fault in a king's wish to conciliate a man with whom he has been quick to anger." And the Lord Marshal Agamemnon answered, "Glad I am to hear you, son of Laertes, finding the right word at the right time for all these matters. And the oath you speak of I'll take willingly, with all my heart, and will not before heaven be forsworn. Now let Achilles wait here, though the war god tug his arm, and all the rest of you wait here assembled till the gifts have come down from our quarters and our peace is made. For you, Odysseus, here is my command. Choose the finest young peers of all Achaea, to fetch out of my ship those gifts we pledged Achilles yesterday, and bring the women. Let Talthybius prepare for sacrifice in the army's name, a boar to Zeus and Helios." Replied Achilles, "Excellency, Lord Marshal, Another time were better for these ceremonies, some interval in the war, and when I feel less passion in me. Look, those men lie dead whom Hector killed when Zeus allowed him glory, and yet you two propose a meal? By God, I'd send our soldiers into action now, unfed and hungry. Have a feast, I'd say, at sundown, when our shame has been avenged. Before that, for my part, I will not swallow food or drink. My dear friend being dead, lying before my eyes, bled white by spear cuts, feet turned to his hut's door, his friends in mourning around him, your concerns are none of mine. Slaughter and blood are what I crave, and groans of anguished men. But the shrewd field commander, Odysseus, answered, Achilles, flower and pride of the Achaeans, you are more powerful than I am, and a better spearman too. Only in sizing matters up, I'd say I'm just as far beyond you, being older, knowing more of the world, so bear with me. Men quickly reach satiety with battle, in which the reaping bronze will bring to earth big harvests, but a scanty yield, when Zeus, war's overseer for mankind, tips the scales. How can a fasting belly mourn our dead? So many die so often, every day. When would soldiers come to an end of fasting? No, we must dispose of him who dies, and keep hard hearts, and weep that day alone. And those whom the foul war has left unhurt will do well to remember food and drink, so that we may again close with our enemies, our dangerous enemies, and be tough soldiers, hardened in mail of bronze. Let no one now be held back waiting for another summons. Here is your summons. Woe to the man who lingers beside the Argive ships. No, all together, let us take up the fight against the Trojans. He took as escort sons of illustrious Nestor, Phyleus' son Meges, Thoas and Meriones, and the son of Creon, Lycomedes, and Melanippus, to Agamemnon's quarters. No sooner was the work assigned than done. They brought the 7 tripods Agamemnon promised Achilles, and the 20 cauldrons shining, and the horses, a full dozen. Then they conducted 7 women skilled in housecraft, with Briseis in her beauty. Odysseus weighed 10 bars of purest gold, and turned back, followed by his young Achaeans, bearing the gifts to place in mid-assembly. Now Agamemnon rose. Talthybius the crier with his wondrous voice stood near him, holding the boar. The son of Atreus drew the sheath-knife that he carried, hung beside the big sheath of his sword, and cut first bristles from the boar. Arms wide to heaven, he prayed to Zeus as all the troops kept still, all sitting in due order in their places, hearing their king. In prayer he raised his eyes to the broad sky and said, May Zeus, all highest and first of gods, be witness first, then earth and Helios and the Furies underground who punish men for having broken oaths. I never laid a hand on your Briseis, proposing bed or any other pleasure. In my quarters the girl has been untouched. If one word that I swear is false, may the gods plague me for a perjured liar. He slit the boar's throat with his blade of bronze. Then Talthybius, wheeling, flung the victim into the offshore water, bait for fish. Achilles rose amid the Argive warriors, saying, Father Zeus, you send mankind prodigious follies. Never otherwise had Agamemnon stung me through and through. Never would he have been so empty-headed as to defy my will and take the girl. No, for some reason Zeus had death at heart for the Achaeans and for many. Well, go to your meat, then we'll resume the fighting. Thus he dismissed the assembly. All the men were quick to scatter, each to his own ship. As for the gifts, the Myrmidons took over and bore them all to Achilles' ship to stow within his shelter. There they left the women and drove the horses to the herd. The girl, Briseis, in her grace like Aphrodite, on entering saw Patroclus lying dead of spear wounds, and she sank down to embrace him with a sharp, sobbing cry, lifting her hands to tear her breast, soft throat, and lovely face, this girl, shaped like the goddesses of heaven. Weeping, she said, Patroclus, very dear, most dear to me, cursed as I am, you were alive still when I left this place. Now I come back to find you dead, my captain. Evil follows evil, so for me. The husband to whom father and mother gave me I saw brought down by spears before our town, with my 3 brothers whom my mother bore. Dear brothers, all 3 met their day of wrath. But when Achilles killed my lord and sacked the city of royal Mynes, not a tear would you permit me. No, you undertook to see me married to the Prince Achilles, conveyed by ship to Phthia, given a wedding among the Myrmidons. Now must I mourn your death forever, who were ever gentle. She wailed again, and women sobbed about her, first for Patroclus, then for each one's grief. Meanwhile, Achaean councillors were gathered, begging Achilles to take food. He spurned it, groaning, "No, I pray you, my dear friends, if anyone will listen, do not nag me to glut and dull my heart with food and drink. A burning pain is in me. I'll hold out till sundown without food. I say I'll bear it." With this he sent the peers away, except the two Atreidae and the great Odysseus, Nestor, Idomeneus, and the old Lord Phoenix. These would have comforted him, but none could quiet or comfort him until he entered the bloody jaws of war. Now, pierced by memory, he sighed and sighed again, and said, "Ah, once you too, poor fated friend and best of friends, would set a savoury meal deftly before us in our field shelter, when the Achaeans wished no time lost between onsets against Trojans. Now there you lie, broken in battle. Ah, lacking you, my heart will fast this day from meat and drink as well. No greater ill could come to me, not news of father's death, my father weeping soft tears now in Phthia, for want of that son in a distant land who wars on Troy for Helen's sake, that woman who makes the blood run cold. No greater ill even should my son die, who is being reared on Skyros, Neoptolemus, if indeed he's living still. My heart's desire had been that I alone should perish far from Argos here at Troy, that you should sail to Phthia, taking my son aboard your swift black ship at Skyros, to introduce him to his heritage, my wide lands, my servants, my great hall. In this late year Peleus may well be dead and buried, or have few days yet to live, beset by racking age, always awaiting dire news of me, of my own death." As he said this, he wept. The councillors groaned, remembering each what he had left at home, and seeing them sorrow, Zeus took pity on them, saying quickly to Athena, "Daughter, you seem to have left your fighting man alone. Should one suppose you care no more for Achilles? There he sits before the curving prows, and grieves for his dear friend. The other soldiers flock to meet, he thirsts and hungers. Come, infuse in him sweet nectar and ambrosia, that an empty belly may not weaken him." He urged Athena to her own desire, and like a gliding sea-hawk, shrilling high, she soared from heaven through the upper air, while the Achaeans armed throughout the ranks. Nectar and ambrosia she instilled within Achilles, that his knees be not assailed by hollow famine. Then she withdrew to her mighty father's house. Meanwhile the troops were pouring from the shipways to the field. As when cold snowflakes fly from Zeus in heaven, thick and fast under the blowing north wind, just so that multitude of gleaming helms and bossed shields issued from the ship, with plated cuirasses and ashwood spears. Reflected glintings flashed to heaven, as the plain in all directions shone with the glare of bronze, and shook with trampling feet of men. Among them, Prince Achilles armed. One heard his teeth grind hard together, and his eyes blazed out like licking fire, for unbearable pain had fixed upon his heart. Raging at Trojans, he buckled on the arms Hephaestus forged. The beautiful greaves, fitted with silver anklets, first he put upon his legs, and next the cuirass on his ribs. Then over his shoulder he slung the sword of bronze with silver scabbard. Finally he took up the massive shield, whence came a radiance like the round full moon. As when at sea to men on shipboard comes the shining of a campfire on a mountain in a lone sheepfold, while the gusts of night wind take them, loath to go far from their friends over the teeming sea, just so Achilles' finely modelled shield sent light into the heavens. Lifting his great helm, he placed it on his brows, and like a star the helm shone with its horsetail blowing free, all golden, that Hephaestus had set in upon the crest. Achilles tried his armour, shrugging and flexing, making sure it fitted, sure that his gleaming legs had play. Indeed, the gear sat on him light as wings. It buoyed him. Now from a spear case he withdrew a spear, his father's, weighty, long and tough. No other Achaean had the strength to handle it, this great Pelian shaft of ashwood, given his father by the centaur Chiron from the crest of Pelion, to be the death of heroes. Automedon and Alcemus with swift hands yoked his team, making firm the collars on the horses, placing the bits between their teeth and pulling reins to the war-car. Automedon then took in his hand the shining whip and mounted the chariot, and at his back Achilles mounted in full armour, shining bright as the blinding lord of noon. In a clarion voice he shouted to the horses of his father, "Xanthus and Balius, known to the world as foals of great Podarge, in this charge care for your driver in another way. Pull him back, I mean, to the Danaans, back to the main body of the army once we are through with battle. This time no leaving him there dead like Lord Patroclus." To this, from under the yoke, the nimble Xanthus answered, and hung his head so that his mane dropped forward from the yoke-pad to the ground. Hera, whose arms are white as ivory, gave him a voice to say, "Yes, we shall save you this time too, Achilles, in your strength. And yet the day of your destruction comes, and it is nearer. We are not the cause, but rather a great God is, and mighty fate. Nor was it by our sloth or sluggishness the Trojans stripped Patroclus of his armour. No, the magnificent god that Leto bore killed him in action and gave Hector glory. We might run swiftly as the west wind blows, most rapid of all winds, they say. But still it is your destiny to be brought low by force, a god's force and a man's." On this the Furies put a stop to Xanthus' voice. In anger and gloom Achilles said to him, "Xanthus, why prophesy my death? No need. What is in store for me I know well. To die here, far away from my dear father, my mother too. No matter. All that matters is that I shall not call a halt today, till I have made the Trojans sick of war." And with a shout, he drove his team of trim-hooved horses into the front line.